In a strange land filled with trees shaped like a witch's fingers and thick black slime spread everywhere, the air already felt heavy with danger. Above it all, the sky stayed dark and foul, covered in a dirty and threatening haze. Trapped in the mouth of a horrifying monster full of sharp teeth, the young man felt pain rip through his body. With growing anger and despair, he reached the point where he could no longer endure it. The beast closed its jaws without mercy and swallowed him whole, while blood kept spilling without end. Dying in a place like that clearly meant total ruin. In the next instant, the boy opened his eyes in his own bed and understood that it had only been a dream. Desperately trying to breathe, he felt that the pain from that last moment had been far too real. What made it even worse was the cruel fact that this same nightmare had followed him for 12 years. Outside, morning rose over the large city as though nothing had happened. Without delay, the young man began writing every dark detail into his notebook. As he got up, he tried to convince himself that he could endure the pain of death itself. Even so, inside the middle of his messy room, the true suffering came from something much simpler: trying to sleep. Drained in both body and mind, he admitted to himself that he had no strength left for anything. The real problem was brutal. Falling asleep in the real world meant being dragged straight back into that horrible place where he would be hunted again. Whenever he suffered a deadly wound in the dream, the pain came back exactly the same in real life. Lying in bed with his hand pressed against his chest, proper rest had become impossible. Buried under extreme fatigue, the young man understood that something had to change. During those 12 years of endless suffering, he had learned battle tactics and martial arts just to stay alive. Moving through tall grass like someone trained to disappear, he had become a skilled fighter. Because of that, cutting down monsters in that living hell had turned normal and dying had become less common. Still, as he walked between the shelves of a library, real life kept wearing him down. Even then, he knew the endless lack of sleep was ruining both his body and his mind. During a visit to the doctor, he was advised to find some quiet hobby that could calm him and help him sleep. With that suggestion in mind, the boy tried to think about what he truly wanted to do with his life. Yet deep inside, surrounded by books on every side, his only real wish was to collapse and rest at last. Broken to the core, the young man could only beg for one moment of peace. Then, without warning, blood poured from his mouth, and his body began to shine in a strange way. Unable to understand anything, his legs lost strength and his vision faded into darkness. His body struck the floor hard, and he passed out in the middle of the library, surrounded by blood. When he woke again, the constant headache was gone, as if it had never existed, and his body felt incredibly light. For the first time in 12 years, he had truly slept, and fresh air filled his lungs. Facing a grim forest, the boy started to wonder if he had finally died in the real world. Resting himself against the trunk of a twisted tree, he carefully studied the scene around him. He struck with force, because this was the same nightmare world that had tormented his life all this time. From within the shadows, a giant lizard-like monster came forward, saliva dripping as it closed in on fresh prey. With his thoughts moving fast, the young man connected everything and recalled the blood he had coughed up before. There was no doubt left in his mind. This time, he had truly died for real. Faced with that harsh truth, everything had now changed completely. Standing upright and ready to move, he understood that if he died here, there would be no body waiting for him in the real world. From that point on, this cursed land had become his only reality. As he stared straight at the monster, the young warrior already understood every cruel rule needed to survive there. The first rule was simple: run toward a bright place, since those creatures hated the light. Even so, a sharp wave of adrenaline surged through his chest. Rather than flee, the boy pulled out his sword and rushed forward with firm resolve. Strength filled his body, and for the first time in a long while, he felt powerful inside a younger body that had finally been given proper rest. In a sudden rush of extreme speed, he closed the distance before the monster could even react. The scaly beast answered with an angry roar and opened its huge jaws, ready to swallow him whole. With his sword steady in hand, every part of his body burned for battle. At that moment, his mind held only one purpose: fight until the end, and destroy everything in front of him. With one fierce strike, the blade cut through the creature and split its body into 2 pieces. As the beast collapsed, the young man landed quietly on the ground, covered in blood. Without wasting time, he drove the sword into the corpse and searched through its insides. From deep inside the remains, he pulled out a glowing core filled with pure blue energy. Putting his eyes on the strange object, he fully understood how valuable it was. Without hesitation, he bit into the stone and swallowed it raw. With blood spread across his face, his resolve to survive in that twisted hell became absolute. Then he returned to moving through the dead forest, and his journey truly began again. Ahead of him, sunlight reached the ground and revealed a bright area that offered safety. At the top of the valley, the warrior finally let out a brief breath of relief as he looked over the scene. After another full night of sleeping outside, he woke up feeling completely renewed. By then, he had spent an entire month cutting his way through the wild growth while heading toward civilization. Even though the desire to fight still stirred inside him, the boy knew that acting on impulse would only bring trouble. Picking a fight for no reason with giant demonic bats would be pure stupidity. Even while hidden in the shadows, the urge for blood still beat heavily inside his chest. The rule was clear. The hunt only started when hunger began to twist his stomach. With a powerful leap, his sword cut through a flying monster and solved the problem of food at once. Along with plenty of meat, another one of those blue energy cores appeared. He swallowed that raw source of power without pause. It was the main path to becoming stronger. He could feel the monster's strength flowing straight into his body. With his hunger gone, he rested in a tree, and eating those stones became the best habit for enduring that harsh routine. During a brief, careless moment, the young man noticed something important on the former owner of that corpse. From the words carved into the wooden tag, it became clear that the dead man had been a third-class mercenary. To his surprise, the boy's mind read those strange runes with unnatural ease. More than that, the simple tag hanging from the corpse's neck proved once and for all that other living people existed in that world. As he looked toward the bright light beyond the forest, the young man understood that he was not alone there. Then a strange metal trap drew his attention. From the first glance, it was obvious that the spiked device on the ground had been made to catch humans. Because of that detail, he realized civilization was much closer than he had first believed. With a quick leap, the warrior moved through the trees, hoping to find someone. Not far ahead, a wooden cabin appeared under the sunlight. His eyes widened at the sight of an actual shelter. Entering the strange place with caution, the boy called out to see if anyone was inside, but no reply came back. He began searching through the dusty furniture around the room. On an old table, a book with a strange cover and drawn runes caught his attention at once. The warrior quickly turned the pages and discovered that it was a record of the demonic realm. The shock on his face made it clear that what he had found was extremely valuable. Inside that book, the history and the laws of that dreadful world had been recorded in great detail. With such an important discovery before him, the young man became certain that he needed that encyclopedia to survive. Then the heavy sound of a boot striking the wooden floor cut through the silence. A gray-haired old man stood there with a giant crossbow aimed directly at his face, demanding to know who he was. Without any patience, the man made it clear that he would put a bolt through the boy's head if he did not get an answer. Even in that tense moment, the young warrior quickly understood that the owner had taken him for a thief. Trying to ease the situation, he explained that he had only entered out of curiosity. Still rough and cold, the old hunter told him to leave at once because he had no interest in talking. Not wanting to push the situation any further, the boy accepted the order and prepared to leave quietly. Even so, before stepping out, he pointed straight at the book covered in golden detail. In a restrained manner, he asked whether he could borrow it or even pay just to read it. The owner of the cabin answered with open challenge, making it clear that refusal was a real possibility. At once, the boy's expression darkened as he explained that the information in that book was necessary for his survival. Right after that, his hand moved straight to the hilt of his blood-stained sword. With a clear threat hanging in the air, he admitted that he would have to become a real thief if it came to that. Slowly, the blade began to leave the sheath, and the weight inside the room changed at once. Even without knowing how strong the old man was, the young warrior had complete faith in his own skill in battle. Unexpectedly, the old man lowered his weapon with a smile and introduced himself as Hector. Surprised by the sudden shift, the young man took the chance and revealed that his name was Kim Woo-jin. Since the older man had trouble saying that foreign name, the newcomer told him to call him Jean instead. Deep down, He knew that his true background was far too complicated for the people of that world to understand. Holding the book with care, Hector explained that the item was precious and could not leave the cabin under any condition. As a condition for allowing him to read the book, the hunter asked for help with the chores, and the boy accepted immediately. Outside, night slowly settled in and covered the small wooden cabin in thick darkness. Inside the iron pot over the fire, a hot stew boiled and released a rich and comforting smell. Seated at the table, the two of them ate dinner in peace, making it clear that the host had a kind side. With the first spoonful, the boy tasted the deep flavor of home-cooked food for the first time in 12 long years. With joy shining in his eyes, the young man devoured the soup and even began to see the old hunter as some kind of angel. The next morning, the sun had barely risen, and Hector was already preparing his equipment to leave for a long hunt. From what had been said the day before, the man's goal was revenge against the beast that had devoured his former companions. Just by watching the tension in the hunter's shoulders, the boy could tell that the creature had to be absurdly strong. With heavy steps, the seasoned hunter crossed the doorway and headed into the danger of the dark forest. Left alone in the quiet safety of the cabin, the young warrior finally opened the journal and began taking in the secrets of that land. Through those old pages, the story revealed that the entire disaster had started in a great empire to the north. Driven by greed alone, the former king had tried to open the gates to another dimension in order to steal absolute power. As a result of that ambition, a beam of red light tore through the sky and brought the beginning of the end. From that dreadful rift, a strange tower covered in eyes rose up and spread the nightmare across the land. Soon after, a horde of giant and twisted monsters invaded reality and destroyed everything in their path. The area quickly turned into demonic territory, forcing humanity to create a magical barrier. After closing the heavy cover of the book, the young man tried to process the huge amount of new information. According to what was written there, the demons became stranger and stronger the deeper someone moved into the darkness. On the other hand, the beasts weakened and grew smaller near places touched by natural sunlight. Far from the cabin, the situation turned desperate as Hector ran through the giant trees in panic. At that same moment, the boy connected the pieces and felt fear rise in his chest as he thought about how deep into that hell he had once been lost. Out of breath and soaked in cold sweat, the veteran hunter struggled to escape certain death in that deadly jungle. Right behind him, 3 massive werewolves with glowing red eyes chased their prey without mercy. With a fast shot from his crossbow, the old man tried to slow the beasts, but their defense was as solid as iron. With one casual swing of a claw, the bolt broke into pieces, showing that those creatures were a true nightmare made flesh. Faced with the absurd speed of the wolves, the old hunter cursed under his breath and realized that his end had come. Then, without warning, a dark shape cut across the forest at a speed even greater than that of the savage beasts. With a sharp blade in hand, the young man burst out from the brush and tore through the wind straight into the center of the chaos. In total desperation, the old hunter shouted with all his strength, ordering the boy to run from the danger. Ignoring that warning, the warrior simply jumped from a high branch and landed directly in front of the beasts. In a low descent, the force of the landing already set his body in place for an attack with crushing power. In less than an instant, a fierce slash tore through the air and split the leading werewolf from head to toe. The sight was so violent that the veteran stood frozen, unable to believe the strength of the newcomer. Shaking at the sight of the ruined corpse on the ground, the owner of the cabin struggled to understand how the beast had been killed in a single strike. Cold and steady, the young man turned his head and called the old hunter by name, cutting through the shock of that moment. With a confident smile, the boy asked whether such a weak creature was truly considered a high-level beast. Still stunned, the hunter could barely process the question and could only think of the danger a werewolf represented. After drawing in a deep breath, the man swallowed hard and confirmed with full certainty that those creatures were terrifyingly dangerous. That answer alone was enough for the young man to react with light amusement at how small the threat seemed. Holding his sword firmly, he declared that he would finish dealing with the remaining wolves before hearing the rest. Standing before the furious pack, the young warrior quickly judged the situation. With around 40 wolves ahead of him, even a small mistake would mean certain death. To avoid the drain of a long battle, the best choice was to crush the morale of the pack. Fixing his attention on the leader, the boy locked his eyes on a giant monster positioned at the front. As dark energy burst out, the sword was already raised and ready to kill. Before a blink could pass, the beast's eyes widened as it sensed the threat rushing toward it. The other werewolves turned in confusion, unable to understand what had just happened. Then the leader's body dropped to the ground and panic spread through the entire pack. Completely terrified, the monsters began barking in desperation. With fear taking over, the whole pack turned around and fled at full speed. Standing with quiet force, the young man wiped his sword against the ground as the dust slowly settled. Hidden among the brush, the veteran watched in disbelief as such fearless beasts ran away in terror. From the boy's sharp thinking, it was clear that he controlled the battlefield better than anyone else. Hours later, the two finally made it back safely to the small wooden cabin. Throwing the giant werewolf onto the table, the hunter explained that the bounty for that beast was 40 gold coins. Caught off guard by the amount, the young man asked if that kind of money was considered a lot in that place. With a broad grin, the old hunter made it clear that such a sum could support a comfortable life for around 7 years. After hearing that, the young man's mind immediately began to measure the profit from that hunt. If one weak wolf was worth that much, then hunting similar monsters would make it easy to fill his pockets. With that thought in mind, life in this new world suddenly seemed far better than the suffering he had left behind. Without delay, Hector prepared a backpack filled with the beast's hide, supplies, and a map. The next task was to head to the frontier village and find a merchant named Jacob. As a gesture of thanks, the old hunter offered the entire reward to the boy. Even though the young man refused at first, Hector insisted and treated it as payment for avenging his dead companions. With clear respect, the old hunter reached out his hand in farewell to the one who had saved him. That firm handshake sealed a bond of shared gratitude between the two. With the heavy pack over his shoulder, the young man gave thanks for everything and set off. Along the bright path, his solitary journey began again toward the so-called village. Between the thick trees, the young warrior disappeared into the distance in search of civilization. With steady steps, the long march through the forest finally came to an end. At the top of a hill, a strange monster fixed on a stake stood as a warning to any threat. Just below it, the frontier village rose into view behind massive wooden walls. Even from far away, the young man could tell that the place was heavily armed for such a small settlement. After passing through the gates, he immediately felt the tension hanging in the air. Along the dirt roads, every face turned toward the stranger with clear distrust. Sensing those heavy stares, the boy understood that outsiders were not welcome there. But in a place like that, one rule stood above the rest. Humans could be worse than demons. Ignoring the hostile mood, the young man pushed open the door of the local tavern. Inside, the noise of mercenaries and drunk men filled the main hall. Walking straight to the counter, the warrior paid no attention to the chaos around him. With a calm manner, he leaned against the bar and ordered a cold beer at once. During a break in the noise, he naturally asked where a man named Jacob could be found. At once, a bald man covered in scars turned his head toward him. Even while picking his teeth with a knife, the man's treacherous look remained obvious as he identified himself as Jacob. Without wasting words, the young man explained that old Hector had sent him to sell a pelt. The merchant's eyes widened in total shock when he heard that the hunter was still alive. With one quick signal of his hand, several large thugs began to close in around the newcomer. Staring at the thick hide, the bald man could hardly believe the perfect quality of the werewolf pelt. At that moment, greed completely took hold of the swindler's rotten mind. With a cruel smile, the criminal finally revealed his real nature without trying to hide it. In a mocking tone, the man praised the fact that the old hunter had managed to obtain such a rare trophy. As they joined the circle, the mercenaries inside the tavern pulled out their knives and prepared for dirty work. Without showing the slightest fear, the young man directly asked what exactly was happening. Already wrapped in the beast's hide, the bandit told him to leave if he wanted to walk out alive. Letting out a tired sigh, the young man concluded that the man truly had the face of a third-rate fraud. Using a weak excuse, Jacob claimed that he was only collecting old debts from the hunter. From the look of it, the bastard intended to use the goods to cover losses that did not even exist. Faced with such garbage, the young man's eyes turned red as he considered cutting the scoundrel down on the spot. Even so, staining his hands over a piece of leather felt too absurd a reason. Without warning, the merchant threw a mug of beer straight into the boy's face as if he were worthless. Laughing at the insult, the the crook told the stranger to disappear before things became worse. Without giving any reaction, the warrior turned around and slowly walked toward the tavern's exit. Satisfied with the theft, the bald man mocked the boy for what he thought was cowardice. With a loud bang, the wooden door shut behind the young man and sealed the room. Then, standing in the middle of the hall, he broke the silence by calling the swindler by name. With a cold and twisted look, the boy made it clear that cheap betrayal was for fools and that the proper way was to go straight for the throat. Paralyzed by fear, the bandit swallowed hard as he understood that he had provoked the wrong monster. Angry at such boldness, the thugs rushed forward with swords raised high. Shouting that the boy had no respect for his own life, the mercenaries launched a joint attack. Faced with that pile of trash, the young man decided that killing them would bring him no guilt at all. With a dodge far too fast to follow, the enemy blade cut through nothing but air. Shaken by the power and speed of that movement, the thug broke into a cold sweat. Like a red flash, the young man's sword moved at once and tore the first fool in half. As blood sprayed across the walls, the real slaughter inside the tavern began. Without losing momentum, the blade cut through a wooden shield and its owner in the same strike. The blow was so brutal that its sound echoed through the entire room. After seeing that damage, one mercenary cursed in panic, already aware that death was close. Without stopping, the boy kept cutting down anyone who stepped into his path inside the tavern. Shaking with fear, Jacob moved backward and tried to understand where such a human monster had come from. The merchant searched for some kind of reason, because someone that strong should already have been known everywhere. Realizing that staying there meant death, the swindler chose to move. Through the back door, he fled during the middle of the slaughter, cold sweat running down his body. Completely consumed by panic, the bald man shouted for his men to retreat. In that frantic escape, chaos spilled into the street as mercenaries crashed into one another. With a violent crash, the entire group was thrown out through the door and slammed onto the dirt outside. Dazed, one of the thugs tried to rise while groaning from the pain. Then, without warning, his face twisted into pure terror. A short distance ahead, a massive red wolf moved forward slowly, growling and letting saliva drip from its jaws. At once, complete chaos broke out, and more screams spread through the street because of the demonic beast's presence. Out on the road, the creature began barking like mad while staring directly at the boy who had just stepped out of the tavern. As he studied the animal, the young man realized that it was the scout wolf that had escaped back in the forest. With red eyes and a dark expression, he asked whether the beast had come there only to meet its own death as well. Faced with that insane stare, the giant wolf became frightened, and the fur on its neck rose at once. Without any hesitation, the huge beast dropped itself to the ground and began whining like a trained dog. In a pitiful sight, the monster rolled onto its back and even wagged its tail, begging for affection. The merchant's thugs stood frozen, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. Thrown off by the scene, the boy lifted an eyebrow at the creature's strange behavior. For a brief moment, he considered the absurd thought that this giant mutant might actually be. Before finishing that idea, the young man stepped forward with purpose toward the mercenaries. With chilling calm, he pointed a finger and ordered the wolf to attack the bandits. Like a faithful soldier, the monster straightened up at once and waited for the command to move. Then, in a savage leap, the beast hurled itself at the criminals and opened its jaws to tear them apart. Screams of agony filled the air as the red wolf devoured the thugs alive. Standing in the shadows of that bloody feast, the young man watched the slaughter with satisfied calm. At a horrible sight, he concluded that this partnership had its uses. On the far side of the chaos, one thug cried out in terror while trying to crawl away. Caught in the middle of the confusion, Jacob searched desperately for some path of escape. Ignoring the panic around him, the young warrior judged the situation with complete calm. In a miserable act, the crooked merchant dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, promising anything if he were spared. Even so, the look in his eyes clearly showed that he was already thinking of revenge the moment he survived. Then, a deafening impact shook the ground, throwing dust into the air as the boy's blade struck the earth just inches from Jacob's face. With his sword buried in the ground, the young man stared down at the coward as he cried like a child. In a low voice, he cursed the fraud and made it clear that he had not believed that pathetic excuse for a second. That dark smile appeared again and left no doubt that he would not pretend to be merciful this time. In a sudden flash, Memories returned of all the times he had been treated like a fool in the real world. The excuse sounded just like those worthless bosses who asked for patience while his pay never reached his account. Back then, still naive, he had endured the humiliation in silence, believing that things would improve. In the end, those empty promises had only turned into endless delays in the salary he had earned through hard work. In his mind, the image came back clearly, his boss playing golf while putting off that month's payment yet again. Furious at the nerve of his former superior, the young man muttered about his own past and the shameless greed of useless men who demanded sacrifice from everyone else while filling their own pockets. Standing before Jacob, he drove his sword into the ground and remembered the misery of surviving while being used by others. At the very least, the pain of real life had taught him one thing: forgiving traitors only invited more trouble. Staring at the blade, the merchant understood that his pitiful crying had failed and his face twisted into pure hatred. With a hidden knife in hand, he launched a sudden attack and rushed forward with a roar. The young warrior reacted at once and blocked the dagger with his own sword. In that instant, he understood once more that filthy exploiters never abandoned their treacherous nature. With his teeth clenched in rage, the swindler shouted a curse with all his strength. Then, in one clean and immediate counterattack, a flawless strike sent blood spraying into the air. With red eyes fixed on the corpse, the young man silently set down his own rule for survival. In that merciless world, allowing himself to be made a fool of again was no longer possible. With the main task finished, he turned his attention to the remaining loose end. He looked toward the wolf, which now held the bag of spoils in its mouth. It was obvious that the beast had chosen to become the hunting partner of the one holding power. After a short moment of thought, the boy turned fully toward his strange new companion. In a casual manner, he asked whether the animal truly intended to follow him. In a submissive and almost affectionate gesture, the wolf lowered its forehead against his hand and accepted a scratch behind the ears. Seeing how clever the beast was, the young man smiled and understood that it knew very well which side was safer. From that point on, the unlikely pair would travel together, bound by a pact shaped through blood and survival. The next morning, a room filled with light showed that his rest had been complete, and the money was already proving useful. With a faint smirk, the young man enjoyed the fact that he had finally had a perfect night of sleep. Stretching his healthy body, he rose feeling refreshed while his new furry companion let out a lazy yawn beside him. Out in the yard, while washing away dirt and sweat in a rough basin, he thought back over everything that had happened the day before. As he drew in a deep breath, the truth of his own actions finally struck him. After thinking it through, the warrior admitted to himself that he had taken human lives, many of them, during the slaughter in the tavern. Yet when he looked inward, a strange and troubling question began to rise. The thought remained in his mind that perhaps the complete lack of guilt came from the fact that those people had been cruel bandits. In truth, cutting those bastards down had felt no different from the addictive thrill of hunting powerful demons. Pressing a hand against his chest while his heart beat faster, the young man smiled in a dark way as he realized that killing had filled him with pure pleasure. Looking down at his own blood-stained hands, he felt that something inside him had changed forever. Cold and controlled, he even considered the possibility that he had become cursed, but soon dismissed it, because the only thing that mattered was staying alive. The bright side was clear. This new reality promised a life 1,000 times better than the slave-like routine of his old world. With a giant wolf at his side and a sword hanging at his waist, the journey began again without the injustice that had defined his past life. Set on making the most of the moment, the young man adjusted his hood and fixed his attention only on what waited ahead. His next destination was the great fifth pioneer city, where he planned to sell the monster pelts. Before going in, he instructed the giant wolf to stay hidden in the bushes so the guards would not cause trouble. As he walked through the crowded streets, his goal was to find the headquarters of the Church Alliance and collect the bounty money. Looking around at the refined buildings, the boy noticed that the influence of the divine ran deep in that place. Soon after, a massive tower with its doors open stood out at the center of the square. After entering the wide hall, he asked one of the workers whether this was the correct place to exchange bounties. The attendant confirmed it, and the young warrior spread the giant werewolf pelt across the counter. Caught off guard and unable to believe it, the clerk first thought it was some kind of joke and said the hide looked like nothing more than ordinary dog fur. But after taking a closer look, the man's eyes widened in shock. Stumbling over his words, The employee shouted through the hall that the item was real werewolf hide. Still shaken, the clerk asked whether the boy himself had truly killed such a terrifying beast. Without reacting at all, the young man simply nodded and waited for his reward. A few minutes later, inside a luxurious waiting room, the silence ended with the arrival of a church superior. The priest apologized for the delay and explained that he had needed to verify the authenticity of such a rare item. Setting a heavy leather pouch on the table, he handed over the payment and asked the boy to inspect it. The moment the bag opened, the shine of 40 gold coins reflected in the young man's eyes and promised years of comfort. Holding real gold in his hands for the first time, he felt his heart beat in a different way. It was not fear that moved him, but greed. With a wide grin, he silently accepted that money in hand was always welcome. Then the priest cleared his throat, shifting the mood as he looked at the young hunter with serious eyes. Seeing the obvious talent of the stranger, the priest asked whether he would accept another task. The moment he heard the word request, the boy saw a perfect chance to earn even more. The clergyman explained that a new monster had recently appeared inside the local quarry and was causing severe trouble. Because of it, the miners had stopped working and the extraction of bloodstones had come to a halt, damaging the city's economy. The danger was serious enough that the creature there was considered far worse than a normal werewolf. For some reason, the priest believed that this quiet young man was the only person capable of handling the problem. Interested in the level of the threat, the boy asked what kind of creature it was. With a grim expression, the priest revealed the name of the monster, Mad Skull, with a bounty worth 70 gold coins. At the sound of that name, the boy's memory flared at once, linking it to the grim journal he had read before. The worst part was that the memory did not come only from those pages, but also from his own experience, because he had faced that monster before. The creature was known for a skull as hard as steel and eyes burning with red hatred. Its savage aggression and brutal toughness made a werewolf seem harmless beside it. In the past, the young man had struggled for an entire month and died around 20 times before he finally managed to kill one. Troubled by the boy's silence, the priest asked whether the hunt would be too difficult. With a confident smile and a sharp look in his eyes, the hunter accepted the mission immediately. At the entrance of the massive circular quarry, the atmosphere alone already made it clear that this would not be simple. Looking at the machinery standing still and the dead silence hanging over the place, the young man understood why the city was so desperate. The dark energy rising from the pit felt so unnatural that just standing near it sent a chill through his body. Wanting to deal with the matter quickly, the young man started down the stairs, but a voice stopped him. A group of heavily armed mercenaries told the stranger to stop and respect the order of those waiting. Already losing patience, the boy questioned since when killing dangerous monsters had started requiring a line. Lifting his hands in a peaceful gesture, the leader of the mercenaries tried to ease the tension. The large man proposed that they work together and form a group to hunt the Mad Skull as a team. Thinking quickly, the young man understood that waiting his turn and dividing the reward offered no benefit at all. At the same time, joining them could save strength and prevent needless conflict. Still, the lesson he had learned in the tavern echoed in his mind and warned him not to trust anyone in that place. With a hard look, he rejected the offer and asked why they would want to recruit someone they did not even know. Letting out an awkward laugh, the leader admitted that he preferred to guarantee the group's survival no matter the cost. From his point of view, the boy's strength would be useful for keeping everyone alive. But the young man, suspicious of the sudden respectful tone, asked how they had decided that he was strong in the first place. At that exact moment, the answer appeared through his giant wolf companion, which stepped out and began sniffing behind a blonde woman in the group. The woman played with the beast, surprised to see such a large creature behave like a tame dog. Irritated by that disobedience, the boy muttered to himself, since he had clearly ordered the animal to stay hidden. Distracted, the giant wolf bit into a large chunk of meat that one of the mercenaries had offered it. The moment it saw the food, the beast completely ignored the angry look of its owner. Then, without warning, the juicy piece of meat slipped from its mouth and dropped onto the dusty ground. Filled with outrage, the young warrior shot a hard glare at the disloyal wolf, finding it ridiculous that it could be bought so easily with a piece of food. What made it even worse was the perfect shine of the meat, which still looked rich and tempting, even after falling onto the dirt. As he swallowed hard, his stomach let out a loud growl and exposed the extreme hunger of someone who had survived on nothing but plants and monsters. His whole body trembled with desire, craving the taste of real human food. Even with the meat lying on the ground, the urge to bite into it was nearly impossible to suppress. Trying to hold onto what little dignity he had left, the boy stretched out a shaking hand and fought against the urge to pick the food up from the dirt. Then, like an angel descending from above, the kind blonde woman noticed his hunger and offered him another clean piece with her own hand. With his eyes shining in pure delight, the young man accepted it as though it were some holy blessing. In his starving mind, that single snack was enough to make the woman seem like a glowing saint, worthy of complete trust. Soon after, the scene shifted to the entire group moving together down through the dark cave of the quarry. As he devoured the flavorful meat skewer, the young man nearly cried from the joy of tasting something so good. Using the walk as a chance to ease the mood, the kind girl finally spoke up and suggested proper introductions. The leader of the team introduced himself as Jonathan, commander of the Black Marlin mercenary group. Still happily chewing, the young man gave his name as Jean and accepted the alliance, already feeling as if he had joined the group. Once they reached the battle area, the mercenary leader immediately ordered the others to prepare the net traps. Turning around, he then told the blonde woman to begin her support work. In a sudden burst of magic, the healer summoned a strange power that caught the young warrior off guard. A mystical circle spread across the ground and revealed the true force of that ancient technique. Focused and steady, the woman blessed the entire area and gave the team a massive tactical advantage. The effect quickly wrapped around the lead fighter's body, making his movements light and swift. Feeling the energy run through him, the mercenary praised the flawless skill used by his partner. Then, with a quick burst of speed, he declared that he would lure the beast back within 5 minutes. Moving low and fast, his boots barely touched the rocky ground because of the power of the magic. From farther ahead, the leader waved and shouted for everyone to prepare for the attack. Watching the scene closely, the boy noticed the incredible speed that the buff had given his ally. Curious at once, he asked whether there was any chance of learning that useful technique himself. One of the mercenaries immediately cut off the conversation and shouted that this was no time for pointless talk. Completely tense, the man warned that even one stupid mistake there would lead to everyone's death. Thinking over the setup, the young man concluded that their strategy was to trap the beast in place and strike it with everything they had. Even so, deep inside, he strongly doubted that such a basic plan would work against a mad skull. Then, without warning, the leader appeared again, running at full speed and fleeing from something brutal behind him. Screaming with all his strength, the man gave the signal for the trap team to move. Right behind him, a massive boar-like abomination tore through the area, crushing everything in its path, foam spilling from its mouth in pure rage and making the mercenaries shake where they stood. The men froze in shock when they came face to face with that nightmare at such close range. Consumed by blind fury, the monster charged straight into the kill zone the group had prepared. In one coordinated motion, a huge net dropped from above and slammed onto the beast's heavy back. With all their strength, the mercenaries pulled on the steel ropes trying to force the creature down into the dirt. Using that brief chance, the spear team moved into position and readied their sharp throwing weapons. Cutting through the air, the spears flew directly toward the trapped target, but the twisted beast released a deafening roar and tore the iron net apart through raw strength alone. The mercenaries were thrown back violently and lost all control of the ropes, completely stunned by what had happened. With one terrifying burst of force, the monster freed itself and destroyed any hope of a simple victory. Without showing the slightest surprise, the young man only watched the disaster unfold, already knowing it would end like this. In total desperation, the leader shouted that the beast's power had broken through all of their defenses. Covered in cold sweat, the men tried to hold the ruined ropes, but the situation was already beyond saving. With a deadly spin, the monster used its giant tusks to rip apart what remained of the trap. Shaken by the disaster about to happen, the healer swallowed hard and saw the worst outcome coming. Faster than a flash, the boy caught the girl by the waist and pulled her out of danger. At the exact place where she had been standing, the massive creature smashed the stone floor apart in a furious charge. Sliding safely across the ground, the young warrior carried her far from the impact area as if it took no effort at all. Angry that its target had escaped, the beast fixed its red eyes directly on the pair. Still held in the young man's arms, the blonde girl cried out and warned him about the monster's absurd level of danger. With a cruel smirk, the boy told her to stay calm. He already knew every single cursed weakness that creature had. Roaring with rage, the mutant beast kicked up a cloud of dust and prepared to crush the arrogant young man. Drawing his sword, the warrior rushed forward and met it head-on with a fierce advance. When the two forces collided, the monster's crushing strength nearly shattered the young man's guarded defense. Claws and fangs pressed down with brutal force and shoved the hunter backward. Even while sliding across the ground, rushed forward and met it head-on with a fierce advance. When the two forces collided, the monster's crushing strength nearly shattered the young man's guarded defense. Claws and fangs pressed down with brutal force and shoved the hunter backward. Even while sliding across the ground, the boy let out a small laugh and admitted to himself that he had lowered his guard for a moment. At once, the healer cast her support magic directly onto his back. In less than an instant, the weight of his body seemed to disappear and his agility rose sharply. Filled with the power of that blessing, the young man became certain that the hunt had now turned easy. From behind, the desperate leader shouted for the rookie to retreat and wait for a group assault. Ignoring the command, the boy burst through the dust cloud and changed the flow of the battle. In his mind, the young man admitted that he strongly preferred handling difficult battles alone. With flawless control, he dodged the attack and made the huge abomination crash into nothing but empty air. From the way he read the fight, the enemy was nothing more than an oversized beast that only knew how to charge in a straight line. To change direction, the stupid creature had to slam its hard back against the quarry walls. Using that weakness, the young man cut into the beast's leg and broke its running posture. Unable to keep its balance, the mountain of muscle crashed down and split the ground with a brutal fall. As he moved into the second step of his plan, the boy gave silent praise to the magic that had made everything far easier. Keeping his eyes on the monster's body, he knew those side tusks could cut worse than long swords. With exact timing, his blade met the attack head-on and stopped the beast's destructive ivory. Shifting the direction of the clash, he turned the strike toward the true target, the soft and exposed snout. A deep vertical wound tore through the beast's nose and sent blood spraying in every direction. Screaming in pain, the creature lost what little sanity it still had and began thrashing without control. Without giving it even a moment to recover, the young warrior rushed forward to deliver the final strike. With one perfect spin, his weapon sliced through the mad skull's neck and ended the monster at once. When the mercenary team ran over, they stopped cold after seeing the absurd result. Completely stunned, both the leader and the healer struggled to understand how the fight had ended so fast. Looking for the young warrior, the blonde woman stepped carefully toward the corpse. Then the giant red wolf jumped in front of her and let out a deep growl guarding its master. Startled by the warning, the girl stopped at once and understood that the beast wanted no one getting closer. A moment later, the young man stepped back into the light, calmly wiping his stained mouth with the back of his hand. Relieved, the mercenary leader hurried to him and asked how he had managed to come out without a single wound. With complete coldness, the young warrior answered that the dangerous monster no longer existed. Behind him, the huge mass of limp flesh lay defeated across the mined stone. Amazed, the entire group celebrated the unbelievable sight of someone bringing down a beast of that level without help. Like a loyal companion of the hunt, the giant wolf showed its teeth, satisfied after feeding on the remains of the bloody scene. Just as the first battle ended, a second mad skull appeared without warning, snorting fiercely with burning eyes. Realizing the danger, the mercenary leader shouted in panic that the hunt was not over yet. But then the healer noticed something that changed the entire situation. Right behind the massive beast, several noisy piglets hurried along, trying to keep pace with their mother. With shrill grunts and curious faces, the little creatures made the scene far less threatening. Striking its hoof against the stone ground, the mother boar kept her eyes fixed only on the escape path. The leader finally relaxed, understanding that the beast did not want to fight and had only come to protect her young. Watching the family vanish into the shadows, the young man admitted that fighting a mother and her children would have gone too far. That night, back in the 5th Pioneer City, the mood was filled with celebration and complete relief. Stopping in front of the local guild, the group prepared to receive the reward from that brutal hunt. Inside, the leader lifted his glass and gave an emotional toast, celebrating the fact that no one had lost their life. Filled with pride, the large man declared that the best part of mercenary work was always the payment. Excited, the group raised their beer mugs, and the feast in the tavern began in full force. Confused by the pile of bags spread across the table, the young man asked whether all of that really came from the 70 gold coins together. Laughing loudly, the leader admitted that he had frightened the priest responsible for handling the payment. During the negotiation, The captain had insisted that the mission was far more dangerous than the official paper claimed. Beating his chest with pride, the big man revealed that he had managed to pull an impressive 110 gold coins out of the church's funds. The young man lifted an eyebrow as he remembered that they had not even fought the mother beast. With a sly smile and a wink, the captain admitted that he had stretched the story quite a bit to raise the payment. The mercenaries laughed hard and praised their captain's sharp tongue. Watching the scene with a faint smirk, the boy found the group's honesty and cunning strangely entertaining. Then, cutting through the celebration for a moment, the captain placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and drew his attention. With fairness in his voice, the man announced before the whole team that he would divide the reward and hand half of it directly to the young warrior. Even off guard, the boy's eyes widened, thinking the share was far too generous. But the captain spoke plainly and made it clear that without the stranger's strength, everyone there would have ended up as food for monsters. On top of that, even after the increased reward, enough money still remained for the rest of the group to enjoy themselves. In a respectful way, the young warrior refused the large amount, remembering that the team's magic and support had also been important. Then, slamming his mug onto the table, he decided to show that he could act like a friend as well. As a gesture of true camaraderie, he declared that the drinks for the entire night would be on him, and the celebration rose even higher. At that, the group lifted their glasses and swore to empty every barrel in the tavern. The next day, as he stepped out of the inn, the young man asked the blonde woman where she was rushing off to. With a gentle smile, the healer explained that she was heading into the forest to practice her support magic. Far from the city, in a field under the moonlight, the girl gave herself fully to meditation. Focused on controlling her mystical energy, her concentration became so deep that mana began to glow around her. Hidden behind the trees, the young warrior watched the scene and quietly respected the effort and discipline of his companion. With his eyes locked on the bluish glow, the thought of learning those techniques began to pound inside the young man's mind. As he imagined the advantage it could give him in battle, he started wondering whether he could truly master that strange power. Later, with a serious look, the young warrior asked the healer if she would be willing to teach him. Without any hesitation, the blonde woman broke into a bright smile and agreed at once to pass on everything she knew. As the reason for her kindness, she admitted that teaching him magic was the least she could do after he had saved her from certain death. Proud of her new companion, she made it clear that most mages would never accept such a request from a swordsman, but that he was an exception. Then the group's leader arrived and warned that learning magic usually took years, while the team planned to leave in only 2 days. With a quick motion of her hand, the girl suggested that the young warrior simply travel with them and learn during the journey. Careful not to disturb the balance of the group, the boy quickly made an excuse and said that he preferred traveling alone. Deep down, he hated lying, but he also knew that living as a lone wanderer had become his safest choice in that world. Changing the subject, he casually asked where the group was heading next. When he heard that their destination was the 4th pioneer city, he realized that their route matched his own exactly. Seeing the chance, the healer pressed the matter again, and the captain agreed with a smile, finding the coincidence too perfect to ignore. After all, traveling with someone that strong was the best protection the mercenaries could hope for. With a small and restrained smile, the young man gave in, and the group's new travel arrangement was settled. Days later, the team moved along the dirt road beside a massive beast of burden. Looking up at it, the young man recognized the creature as a Tarrasque, a giant monster that had been tamed to replace horses. Impressed by its size, he compared it to what he had read in the Journal of the Demonic Realm. Walking at the front, the large man warned everyone that the trip would be long and told them to keep moving without slowing down. During the night spent camping under the moonlight, the magic training finally began, and the young man quickly learned that it was far from simple. Disappointed by his own lack of talent, he came to see that the worst part of learning was the endless repetition that wore down the mind. Even with the healer teaching him patiently, controlling that invisible flow seemed impossible for him to grasp. Sweating through meditation, the frustration of making no progress struck hard at his pride. Even so, that kind of pain and failure was something the young man knew better than anyone. After enduring 12 years of dying inside his dreams, the young man's mind had turned into something like an unbreakable machine. Staying fully focused and direct, he decided that he would repeat the same attempt again and again until the magic finally worked. Then, in the middle of the darkness, a small blue spark suddenly crackled at the tip of his finger. Filled with joy, the healer jumped up and declared that he had finally managed to sense the flow of mana. Wiping sweat from his forehead, the young man admitted that he was disappointed it had taken 10 full days just to feel that first faint spark. With complete honesty, the girl agreed that he was terrible at it, but reminded him that many people spent their entire lives without producing even a single trace of magic. Excited by that small step forward, the teacher pulled several strange vials from her bag and announced that it was time for the second stage. Letting a glowing liquid fall onto a metal plate, she prepared a special ink for the next part. With a completely calm face, the blonde woman pointed at him and told him to remove his shirt right there. Without understanding what was happening, the young man obeyed while the cold night wind moved through the trees. Staying focused, the healer dipped her finger in the magic ink and drew a complex circle across the bare skin of his back. After finishing, she explained that the mark would act as a forced path for mana to enter his body. Keeping all his attention on the process, the young warrior closed his eyes and waited for the promised flow of energy. Without warning, the symbol began to shine and released sparks that burned against his skin like heated iron. In only a few seconds, his entire body lit up in a bright blue aura as raw power spread through him. His eyes widened as overwhelming strength rushed through his veins, and he realized that this form of magic stood on an entirely different level. With mana flowing through his body, the boy felt that force moving like thick blood. Watching him shine with intense light, the healer asked whether he could feel the perfect movement of magical energy. Pleased with the result, she announced that the first of the 3 vital stages had finally been completed successfully. According to the rules of magic, the first step was to sense it, the second was to store it, and only then could the real use of magic happen in the third stage. Overjoyed, she suggested moving straight to the next challenge without losing any time. The method required forcing mana from the surroundings directly into the heart while the learner held his breath. With complete concentration, the young warrior shut his eyes and tried to form that so-called invisible container inside his chest. The moment the healer placed her hands on him and started the transfer, pressure spread so heavily that the whole forest seemed to howl. Then all at once, a cold shiver ran through the healer's spine and warned her that something was deeply wrong. In a violent burst of energy, the young man's mana overflowed like a dark tornado and hurled the girl to the ground. In panic, she realized that her own life force was being pulled into the chest of that human monster. Just before losing consciousness, a powerful impact threw her body far away and broke the deadly connection. Still dazed, the girl lifted her head and found herself staring at the red wolf, which was growling low. Shocked, she tried to understand whether the beast had sensed the danger and attacked on purpose to save her. The moment he saw the blonde woman on the ground, the young man snapped out of his trance and called her name, startled by the chaos around him. Rushing to her side, he dropped to his knees and anxiously asked whether she had been badly hurt. Still trapped in shock, the healer could barely answer, since her mind was still caught in the horror she had witnessed. During the transfer of magic, their connection had forced a dreadful vision of the young man's inner world into her mind. That spiritual space should have reflected peace within the soul, yet what she saw looked like a hell ruled by twisted beasts. Shaking, she could not understand how someone so calm could carry such darkness inside. Grabbing his shoulders, the blonde woman demanded a direct and honest answer. With a trembling voice, she asked whether he had ever done something mad enough to eat the core of a demonic monster. Confused by the unfamiliar term, the young man raised an eyebrow and made it clear that he had no idea what she meant. When she described a blue stone filled with energy, he merely shrugged and admitted that he ate those things all the time. Completely stunned, the girl's eyes widened, and she demanded to know how many of those stones he had swallowed. After doing the numbers in his head, the young man replied with total calm that he had been eating them like snacks for around 12 years. That meant the total had to be in the tens of thousands. Hearing such an insane number, the healer stood frozen with disbelief, convinced that it had to be some kind of sick joke. According to the rules of magic, the answer was simple. If a human swallowed a core, survival was impossible. Any fool who tried it was supposed to die on the spot from poison. Even worse, the body could twist and change, turning that person into a corrupted demonic monster forever. Jean tilts his head up under the moonlight, one eye glowing red. A deer stands over a blood-soaked carcass in a dark forest. As karma is described, a deer with glowing eyes and blood around its mouth remains in the forest, showing that karma is the corrupted energy from the demonic realm. And those who absorb it gain unnatural abilities. A monstrous deer lets out a roar, while a monster core is described as a nucleus formed from built-up karma inside the body. Claire stands beside the Teresque while Jean and Jonathan walk near it along the forest path. Claire narrows her eyes, uneasy, noting that the dark priest appears when the otherworldly gate opens and karma consumes the world. A robed figure raises an arm as a mass of eyes spreads behind him, and some humans begin to follow monsters that absorb karma, calling them angels. A monstrous deer stands over a human body on a stone altar as those people consume monster. Cores are consumed, and some offer humans to monsters as sacrifices, earning the name of madmen. Jean looks ahead, recalling how he began consuming them while hunting monsters and continued for around 10 years, possibly reaching thousands or even tens of thousands. A mass of glowing red eyes spreads through the darkness as Claire realizes he has consumed monster cores and considers the possibility that he could be a dark priest. Claire lowers her head in thought while Jean stands behind her, confused, as she decides he cannot be a dark priest since he openly admitted it and revealed his mental world. Jean swings his sword, cutting through a purple creature while Claire walks behind him, thinking it might be even stranger that he kept consuming monster cores without knowing the danger. Jean holds the severed body in one hand as blood drips from the cut. Claire shuts her eyes while Jean stands behind her chewing, questioning why he would pick up and eat something so foul. Claire crosses her arms and stares ahead while Jean continues chewing beside her, seeing him as a strange man and wondering what he eats now, knowing he copied monsters by consuming cores. She leans toward him with a serious look, making it clear he must stop consuming monster cores as luck is the only reason he is still alive. Jean rests his hand on his chin, thinking about how she claims consuming cores kills a person or turns them into a monster, yet he remains alive, making him question if that belief is wrong. Jean looks forward calmly, wondering if his lack of feeling after killing and his constant urge to fight are caused by the cores. His eye glows red as he stares ahead, suspecting the cores are the reason. Jean walks away with a sack over his shoulder, saying he will try, while Claire calls after him, insisting he must stop completely. Claire stands behind him with arms crossed, warning that continuing will put his life at risk and prevent him from using magic, causing Jean to react in surprise. Jean turns back, questioning if it is true that he will lose the ability to use magic, while Claire shows that this matter is even more serious than his life. Claire lets out a breath, explaining that in his current state using mana manifestation will be difficult, though it is not completely hopeless. She raises one finger, pointing out that he should still be able to use mana arts at least. Jean turns his head, unsure of what mana arts are. Fourth Pioneer City rises with a tall tower standing above the surrounding building. People gather in a plaza beneath a high column topped with a winged statue, water flowing around it from a fountain. Jean scans the crowded plaza as Claire and Jonathan stand behind him, noting the large number of mercenaries gathered and that it is too early to be shocked given the size of the request. A silver-haired knight in armor walks before the crowd as the mission is overseen by a holy knight. Holy Knight Raymond moves forward in full armor with a long sword resting at his side. Jean glances back while Claire shows a faint smile beside him as the Holy Knight observes them from behind. The Holy Knight shifts his gaze toward Jean, sensing a heavy presence far beyond that of ordinary mercenaries, recognizing he is not a normal human. Jean looks toward Claire, wondering if large crowds always gather when a Holy Knight leads the task. Claire explains it happens because the request comes from the Golden Bug Wolf. Jean turns to her, questioning if the Golden Bug is some kind of insect-type monster, while she reacts as if it is strange he does not know. Jean keeps a confused look as she realizes he knows almost nothing beyond hunting. He walks beside Jonathan and Claire, placing his arms behind his head as the Golden Bug is described as a powerful businessman with vast wealth, one of the richest figures around. Jonathan lowers his gaze, mentioning the Golden Bug died suddenly not long ago. Jean walks beside him, wondering if the death was caused by someone. Jonathan continues walking with his arms behind his head, noting that there are rumors, but nothing confirmed. Jean looks toward the crowd gathered near the request board, questioning why so many people are present if the Golden Bug is already dead. Jonathan explains while walking beside him that the Golden Bug left behind 2 sons. The 2 sons stand back to back, surrounded by piles of gold and valuables. As the task involves moving their fortune into the barrier, Jean looks ahead in silence, thinking about transporting such massive wealth while noticing the large crowd. He stiffens slightly while standing with Claire and Jonathan as a voice calls for the Black Marlin mercenary group to step forward. Jonathan pushes Jean through the crowd, forcing him ahead as their turn arrives. He stands beside Jean, gesturing toward him while presenting him as the group's strongest fighter, known for defeating a mad skull and taming a werewolf. Jean turns his head slightly, sweat running down his face, as people in the crowd stare and question his strength, calling him the rumored head crusher. Jonathan keeps a grin while Jean shows discomfort, as the situation is brushed off and endured. The silver-haired Holy Knight Raymond looks forward calmly. Jean and Jonathan stand before the request board as Raymond announces the reward of 100 gold coins and orders departure at sunrise the next day. Jonathan clenches his fist and shouts in excitement, urging movement, while Jean raises his fist beside him, noting the high payment just for transporting goods. He shows confidence with a raised thumb, explaining that half the reward is for the work and the other half comes from reputation, which determines the hiring fee. Jean looks ahead with a calm face as sweat runs down, while Jonathan points out they received a high reward thanks to Jin's reputation as the head crusher. Jonathan stands beside him, explaining that the name Head Crusher has become his nickname as an image forms of Jean smashing a monster's head. Jean lets out a breath with a tired look, thinking the person who created that name has poor judgment. Jonathan walks beside him with a sack over his shoulder, treating the 100 gold coins as a huge win, while Jean moves in silence. Jean keeps a serious look ahead, seeing this level of fame as a way to learn mana arts. A large building stands under the moonlight, lamps glowing from its windows, known as the mercenary group quarters. Inside a packed arena, one fighter clashes with another while the crowd shouts for blood and urges them not to back down. A punch crashes into a fighter's face, snapping his head back from the force. Claire stands near the railing, uneasy about Jean stepping into the arena, while a victor raises his arms and Jean wraps bandages around his hands. Jean tightens the cloth around his fists, focused on drawing attention to learn mana arts, as Claire watches with concern. Jean stands in the wooden arena, adjusting the bandages on his arm, as it is known that holy knights take interest in strong individuals. Raymond looks forward calmly, as those acknowledged for their strength can receive better treatment. Jean faces an opponent in the arena, fists wrapped, viewing the fight as manageable. He looks toward the stands, seeing the arena as a place where fighters risk their names, aiming to attract the holy knight's attention. Jean lands a fast punch to his opponent's face, marking the first strike. An arm swings in response, striking Jean across the side of his face. Jean drives his fist into the opponent again, blood spraying as the man's head snaps back. He grabs the opponent's head with both hands as the body recoils. Jean slams his own head forward into the opponent's face. The opponent is thrown backward through the air, while Jean stands with one leg raised, and the crowd shouts that the head crusher lives up to his name. Raymond lifts a mug and drinks while watching the arena, as Jean notices he has gained attention. Jean throws another punch into a new opponent's face, realizing that attention alone is not enough, and that this is only the beginning. He spins and kicks another opponent across the head, knowing he needs to defeat more fighters to be taken seriously. Jean drives his knee down into another opponent's head, thinking that taking down a few more should be enough. Jean stands at the balcony railing, watching the arena, as his thoughts remain fixed on the holy knight. The knight begins to question where someone like Jean came from. Jean stands in the arena with defeated fighters scattered around him, thinking about taking down many opponents. He looks toward the balcony where Raymond and the red-haired knight stand, believing that a true knight would think this way. Raymond turns toward the red-haired knight and gives an order for Rex to fight Jean. Rex looks ahead with a tight expression, shocked at being told to face a mere mercenary. Jean stands below as Raymond and Rex look down at him, and it becomes clear that this moment marks the real beginning. Jean keeps a calm expression and refuses, showing that this is how he starts negotiations to learn mana arts. Rex stares ahead with wide eyes, caught off guard. The mercenary dormitory stands under the night sky, the full moon casting light over it. Claire looks ahead with worry, staying silent. Jonathan also faces forward, tense and quiet. People in the arena crowd stare toward the ring, confused, unsure of what is happening. Rex grips the railing and shouts down, demanding a reason for the refusal. His fist tightens, teeth clenched in anger, while Raymond remains calm beside him. Raymond stands at the railing, looking down and checking if Jean has been injured. Jean raises a bandaged hand with ease, showing no signs of harm. Raymond narrows his eyes, questioning the reason for the refusal. Jean stands in the arena with a hand on his chest, presenting himself as a mercenary driven by money and strength, unwilling to fight a holy knight apprentice without gain. He looks up with confidence, proposing a wager. Raymond looks down, thinking it over, noting that both sides must want something for a bet to work, questioning what Jean could offer. Jean crouches beside a fallen fighter, looking up, pointing out that even without status, he holds a massive amount of wealth. He lifts a heavy pouch filled with gold coins, letting it swing in his hand. Jean stands in the arena holding the pouch as the crowd reacts in shock, some realizing he is proposing a gamble with a holy knight. Rex glares forward, jaw tight, filled with anger. Raymond reaches out and grips Rex's shoulder, making it clear they do not need Jin's money. He looks ahead calmly and shifts the terms. Jean looks up at two robed figures standing behind the railing, as Raymond states they will remove all responsibility for any damage during the fight. Raymond looks down from above, making it clear that this is their condition. Jean smiles, tapping his chest, deciding he will reveal what he wants after the duel ends, already thinking that without any cost for damages, he can defeat Rex. Gene accepts, showing he plans to take the fight as far as he wants. Rex tightens the bandages around his hand while standing across from Gene in the arena. Rex stares forward with a strained glare, sweat and shadow covering his face. Gene looks straight ahead with narrowed eyes, calm and steady. Spectators lean over the railing, shouting and pointing toward the arena, pushing him to fight and placing their bets on Gene. Gene shifts his stance slightly while Claire stands behind him with clenched hands and Jonathan folds his arms, telling him to signal if things turn dangerous while Gene shows no concern. Gene tilts his head with quiet confidence, certain of victory. Rex stands in the arena, looking ahead, questioning how far he should go, and Raymond answers from above, telling him to use full strength. Raymond looks down with focused eyes, knowing Gene will not be easy to handle. Rex stands with his back turned as golden energy begins to swirl around his body, both fists tightening as he prepares. Spectators lean forward, shouting with excitement as they notice the use of mana arts, cheering for the holy night. Rex plants his foot firmly, golden energy spiraling around his leg. He bursts forward, golden energy trailing behind as he closes in on Gene. Gene turns his head with widened eyes, realizing the speed is far beyond normal. Rex's fist slams into Jin's body with a surge of golden force. Jin's face tightens, blood forming at the edge of his mouth, understanding that a direct hit like this could be fatal. Rex drives his arm forward again, golden energy streaming along it, while Gene watches closely, noting the strange nature of mana arts. Gene raises his bandaged hand in front of his face, blocking the incoming strike. Rex brings his glowing fist down hard, golden energy bursting at the point of impact. The strike explodes against Gene, throwing him backward across the arena floor. Gene wipes blood from his mouth with the back of his bandaged hand as Rex focuses on him. Rex stares ahead, golden energy flickering around his fist, seeing Gene as nothing more than a wild beast despite his reputation, intent on crushing him. Spectators lean over the railing in shock, realizing the head crusher is being forced back and that even a trainee holy knight stands on a different level, while one voice fears losing everything. Claire watches with a tight expression, focused entirely on Gene. Raymond stands with arms crossed, silently observing the fight. Rex charges again, surrounded by swirling golden energy, while Gene raises his arms and braces as he is pushed back. Gene covers his face with his bandaged hand as the golden force crashes toward him. The force sends Gene sliding backward across the arena floor. Raymond rests a hand on his chin, sensing something unusual. Gene crosses his arms in front of his body, blocking as golden blows crash into him, while it is noted that he had taken down the other mercenaries with single strikes. Raymond narrows his gaze, noticing how passive Jin's movements have become, suspecting he is holding something back. Rex shows anger, teeth clenched tight. Rex leaps high, golden energy spiraling around his arm, then drives a glowing fist downward. The attack rushes toward Gene, who redirects it across the arena. Gene shifts aside, extending a hand as Rex's glowing strike slams into the balcony behind him, breaking part of the floor. Jonathan tightens his fist, shocked, realizing Gene deflected mana arts with his bare hand, questioning if that should even be possible. He stares forward with wide eyes, tension clear on his face. Gene turns slightly away, blood dripping from his mouth. He wipes the blood with a faint smile, deciding he has finished measuring Rex's strength. Gene lowers his bandaged fist, considering testing Rex's endurance next. His punch crashes into Rex's body with a heavy burst of force. Rex's eyes widen, sweat forming as shock sets in. Gene frowns, confused, realizing the hit was just a normal strike, yet Rex reacted strongly, questioning if Rex had been waiting for an opening the entire time. Rex bends forward, coughing hard, while Gene stands beside him calmly, making it clear he had been holding back and taking his time. Gene looks down with a faint smile, blood still at the edge of his mouth. He bends slightly, noting that even after a strong hit, Rex is still standing, wondering if that is due to mana arts. Rex struggles, sweating and breathing heavily, still trying to endure. Gene cracks his fingers, showing interest in how many hits Rex can take. Rex's face tightens in confusion as he senses movement. Raymond raises his hand toward Rex, stopping him, making it clear the fight is over and that Rex has lost. He faces forward with a firm expression, deciding to honor what was promised and end the match. Gene stands relaxed, his bandaged hand hanging loosely, showing slight annoyance as he had only just begun. A faint smile forms on his face, blood smeared across his lips as he stays still. He realizes his plan worked. The crowd leans forward around the arena, fists raised, shouting with excitement. Jean stands facing the two knights on the platform. A large mansion stands under the night sky with a fountain set before it. This is the Golden Bug Wolf's mansion. A man bites into a large piece of meat, grease running down his mouth. Two shirtless men sit at a table full of food, tearing into meat with their hands. They are known as the Golden Bug's first son, Derek, and second son, Cedric. Both men tear into large chunks of meat, chewing heavily as sweat runs down their faces. One of them complains that it will take 10 days to reach the wall, blaming the Order Alliance for it. He keeps chewing with clenched teeth, sweat dripping, seeing them as empty talkers with no real action. A hand grips a bundle of noodles tightly, crushing it as sauce splashes outward. He questions whether they can last until then, realizing there are no other option. One man leans over the table, food held near his mouth, his back covered in glowing blue growths. He believes the only choice is to endure and hope their bodies hold together until that time. The blue growths swell and throb across his skin. Raymond stood before a tree and pressed his hand against the trunk while the idea of mana arts was revealed in its raw form, not as some flashy move, but as the very base of combat itself. Mana took shape like an extra limb, strengthening both body and blade. The idea sounded simple, but its highest form was terrifying. Then he drew his sword and moved in one clean strike. A burst of yellow energy exploded outward in the form of a sacred flame slash. The nearby trees were cut apart at once, crashing to the ground as the sound spread through the forest. Raymond calmly sheathed his blade as if the act meant nothing. Rex instantly broke into applause, fully stunned, pouring out praise toward Raymond as though he were standing before a living legend. The admiration nearly crossed into worship. Raymond ended it at once. He called for Rex to switch in. Rex immediately straightened up, responded without delay and quickly stepped away. At the same time, Jen watched in silence, bothered by something in that technique. The feeling stayed in the back of his mind, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Instead of being swept up in awe, he studied the broken trees and examined the result. It was powerful. It was polished. But even so, that level of destruction felt like something that should be reached without leaning on a special technique. Before he could stay on that thought any longer, Raymond turned to him and brought his attention back. He explained it in a simple way. Mana had to move like muscle. Just as veins rose and muscles tightened, mana had to be grasped and held within the body in the same way. Jen let out a breath and steadied himself. That part, at least, was already familiar to him. Then he suddenly stopped in the middle of focusing. Something felt wrong. A huge wave of mana rushed through his body, far greater than anything he had ever felt before. But it was not violent or unstable. It moved in a calm, smooth, nearly weightless way. Then the answer struck him. It was Claire's mana. The energy around him began to change. Blue shifted into a deep and unsettling purple. Behind him, Raymond kept explaining, unaware at first, guiding him to release the mana slowly, little by little. Then Raymond felt it and turned. The air itself grew tense. Purple mana wrapped around Jen's sword like a living whirlpool, dense and suffocating. Raymond's eyes widened. Jen was already bringing out mana arts just by hearing the theory alone. But that was not even the true issue. Mana arts reflected the user's inner world, the shape of their mind, the core of their nature. So what kind of mind could create something like this? That aura was not only strong, it was twisted, dark, wrong. Raymond kept staring at Jen as a sense of unease slowly rose inside him. He could not help but wonder what kind of monster was being hidden beneath that calm exterior. Jen, on the other hand, only smiled, completely untouched by the tension. He held his sword in one hand and began to move. He swung to the left, then to the right, and followed with a clean thrust forward, testing the feel of it and trying to understand the flow. But something did not sit right with him. His control felt rough. The energy burned away too quickly and the result felt wasteful. It consumed too much and gave back too little. The cost was high, but the force was lacking. Even so, his grin only grew wider. It looked ridiculously cool. And in that instant, one clear thought hit him. He needed to test it in a real fight. The scene then shifted to Claire, who was clearly impressed. Jen had not simply learned mana arts. He had practically taken hold of it the moment he was taught. Even she failed to fully hide her surprise. Jen, however, stayed grounded and gave all the credit to her. Still, one thing had been bothering him. When she strengthened him earlier, it had not felt temporary. It felt as if a part of her mana had remained inside his body. Claire paused for the briefest moment, then brushed it aside and treated it lightly. She made it sound like nothing more than a small gift for saving her life. Jen did not truly buy that explanation. A small gift did not feel like this. Still, because of that gift, he was learning far faster than he ever should have. As Jen kept riding forward, Rex passed by and immediately started talking. He belittled Jen's progress, treated mana arts like a basic skill, and added a sharp remark about Jen wasting Sir Raymond's time. Someone was clearly still holding on to yesterday's anger. Jen let out a quiet sigh in his thoughts, already tired of it. So Rex was still upset. Then a smirk slowly formed. That worked just fine for him. Things had been dull anyway. If Rex wanted tension, Jen had no problem pushing it further. He even started wondering if he could provoke him into asking for another rematch. Jen did not waste time. He casually tapped the back of Rex's horse and the animal shot forward like a rocket. Chaos followed at once. Raymond rode past Jen and immediately moved to handle the problem, stepping in to calm things down, apologizing, and assuring everyone that Rex would be controlled. But before the situation could settle, an angry scream burst out from the lavish tent on top of the terrace. The voice cursed the servants as useless fools, complained about hunger, and demanded that the food be brought out immediately. Raymond brushed it aside and explained it away. It was only the clients, the sons of the so-called Golden Bug. Since their father had died, all they had done was eat without stopping, and whenever the food stopped coming, they lost control. According to him, the best choice was to ignore them. Jen did not ignore it. Something about it felt wrong. Calling it stress eating felt far too simple. As more and more food vanished into that tent, the atmosphere itself seemed to grow heavier. It felt oppressive, unnatural. Jen's eyes narrowed as his suspicion deepened. This was not normal. It felt like something was gathering behind it all. Beneath that endless hunger, it felt as though a monster was preparing to break free. Then Jen's eyes widened sharply. A thunderous roar ripped through the forest, the terrace. The ground shook hard, and then it collapsed. Panic exploded across the area immediately. Still on horseback, Raymond demanded a report, his voice cutting through the disorder. His men answered at once. The terrace carrying the clients had gone completely mad. For the briefest moment, Raymond went still. The Golden Bug's sons were on it, but there was no room to think. He called for Rex and pulled out his sword, golden energy flaring around him as he prepared to move. Raymond rushed forward without the slightest hesitation and took command of the crisis. His orders came out fast and absolute. The clients had to be protected no matter what. The terrace had to be subdued, and if there was no other choice, it had to be killed. Rex responded immediately and moved to carry out the order. But the true horror showed itself in the next instant. The luxurious tent was ripped open from the inside. Grotesque spikes tore through it, shredding the fabric apart. And from the ruined shelter, a giant worm-like creature came crashing down. So this had never been a simple outburst. Claire's voice cut through the shock as she identified it as an abomination. Jen immediately questioned it, trying to understand what he was seeing. Claire gave the answer without delay. An abomination was what happened when a human was twisted into a beast by Mag Young's karma. It was not something born that way, it was made. Jen's mind jolted at the meaning of it. A human had become that thing. Raymond drew a breath and launched himself forward as mana surged through him. In one decisive attack, using Divine Flame Cleave, he split the monster into 4 clean pieces. There was no pause, no pity. He then called for Rex, who leaped in and cut through the remains, scattering chunks of flesh across the ground. For a brief moment, it seemed finished. Then the body moved. The severed pieces twitched, then began dragging themselves back together. The creature was regenerating. Raymond's eyes widened as he warned Rex to be careful. But he was already too late. Rex stood there, only just realizing that something had gone terribly wrong. Then, behind him, the monster rose again. In one horrifying instant, it lunged and swallowed him whole. Everything fell silent. Only his arm remained behind, still clutching the sword.